Okay, this is my project for the agent-based simulation course. Um, Basically, what this is a model of a situation where there is a herd, or a flock of sheep with wolves or coyotes as a potential predator, and some livestock protection dogs um, that the agriculturist is using to protect the flock of sheep from the potential predators. Um, some, this is a real world phenomena. People use livestock protection dogs in this country and in Europe, and have done so for thousands of years. Um, there's been a couple of, well, at least one previous model that I looked into that was done to try to emulate this system. Um, I kind of, as I was putting this together, I did that as my literary review. Um, this is the model on the screen now. Basically, what we have here is the mod. I've clicked the setup button, so it's set up and ready to run. At this point, we have black patches designating areas of the environment where the sheep are not, so just wildland or whatever, and the green patches designate a sort of field or pasture where the sheep are free to roam, and the sheep are obviously these white agents here. Um, Deployed amongst the sheep are these livestock protection dogs, which are represented by these brown, like dog-like um, icons. They're actually the same icons that I used to designate the wolves up here, which are gray. It's this default wolf shape that was available in NetLogo. I just changed the color for to designate, brown for dogs, gray for wolves or coyotes or whatever. So I'll go ahead and run this simulation. So basically what you have here is these blue spheres are sort of the area of influence for one of the working livestock protection dogs. So if a wolf is approaching the field and potentially going to prey on a sheep, and they encounter like one of these dogs, they're forced to sort of turn around. We assume that they would be deterred by one of these livestock protection dogs. Right now, I think there are 4 dogs in the environment. There's 51 sheep, although actually there's only 37 sheep now. They're being killed off by the wolves. The sphere of influence here around the dogs is a variable. It's called dog strength, so it can be anywhere from 1 to 8. It'd be the radius of patches around the dog that a wolf would be deterred from. So, the variables I have here are the number of dogs, the number of wolves, number of sheep, and the dog strength. It would actually be good as an extension for the model to be able to vary the size and dimensions of the field area. It'd be interesting to see how that affected the system. Just for for the scope of this project, it was a little hard to do. You can see at this point with the current parameters, it's been about 9,000 steps, and all the sheep have been killed. So basically, what's happening here is that the wolves are outnumbering the dogs. I used behavior space to run this model with using a lot of different permutations. Basically, in sort of a factorial way, I increased the number of dogs in the environment, increased the number of wolves. I left the sheep as a constant at just 51 sheep to start with, and I also varied the dog strength. So basically, I wanted to see how the dog strength and the ratio of dogs to wolves affected the success rate of these dogs. Um, and I found that the dogs do a pretty good job up until they're outnumbered by the number of wolves in the environment. So, and dog strength also plays a key role here. The greater the sphere of influence of the dogs, so the greater the area they're able to sort of protect independently, the more successful they are. So if I kind of change these parameters using my sliders, so I'm going to decrease the dog strength now to 4. I'll increase the number of dogs to, I don't know, 10. I'll decrease the number of wolves to like 3. Set it up. It's taking a pretty long time to render when I hit the setup button. Not sure why. If it's particular to the way I coded this. There really didn't seem to be that much going on in my setup procedure, so I'm not sure exactly why it's taking so long. But so we're set up here. We see obviously a lot more dogs now, fewer wolves. I'll go ahead and I'll run this. You can see the sphere of influence for the dogs is much smaller. There's a lot more dogs, and they're doing a better job. The sheep are dying off at a much slower rate, which is what I would expect. There is some weirdness in the animation here. Like there seem to be some rainbow colors here, and I'm not, I'm not sure if this is just some sort of rendering effect or a bug or something like that. I'm not sure what's happening there. It's nothing I coded. You see we're here at about 4,000 steps now, and the dogs have been able to adequately protect the sheep. 10 dogs. The dogs are outnumbering the wolves about a little more than 3-1, and under these conditions, they're able to do a good job. I guess if you were looking at this as an agriculturist and you wanted some real world takeaway, it'd be, have more dogs than you expect there to be predators or something like that. Or, again, if you look at the data, the dog strength is also a big factor. So it's a combined factors of dog strength along with the number of dogs are really the thing that someone sort of using these dogs in a real world scenario could affect. So having more effective dogs is important. If I have a lot of really ineffective dogs, they're not as successful. So it just kind of allows you to kind of vary the number of dogs along with their strength and see what works. So that's basically it. I'll stop this. Still no sheep have been killed under these circumstances. Show you a little bit of the code. Here's the various breeds that are involved in the model. Sheep, wolves, and dogs. Types of patches. Field patches are there to denote, to designate the patches where the pasture is, or the field is, where the sheep are allowed to roam. Dog nearby and wolf nearby. These are also booleans that I use to analyze whether or not a dog is nearby, and therefore a wolf would be forced to turn away and go in the other direction, or I use the wolf nearby type to figure out where I'm going to have the dogs go. Because if you look at the dog movement procedure down here, it's somewhat random, but also they're somewhat directed to sort of go and try to find the wolves. So, and the wolves basically they're their movements are somewhat random. If they do encounter a sheep, they'll kill it, and that happens down here. If there is a sheep on a patch they end up on, then they sort of eat that sheep. The movements of the sheep are entirely random within the designated field area. Ideally, I would have had them behave in a sort of more flock-like type movement pattern. Um, but again, I didn't really have the time to kind of program that in for this project. Another possible extension for the project would be to kind of gear this model towards a scenario where the sheep aren't within a designated pasture land, and they're kind of, you're sort of emulating a scenario where they're grazing on like public lands, which actually happens. So where they're in a flock, but there's no actual boundary between the pasture and wildlands. They're just sort of grazing in wildlands in a flock, and the dogs are protecting them that way. That would also be an interesting scenario to kind of experiment with. But again, it was outside of the scope of this project. Yeah, so here's the setup procedure. I set up the sheaves, the wolves, the dogs. I set up the field patches, and each time the go method is called, I'm doing basically, if there's no sheep left in the model, I'm stopping the run. That's sort of the end condition. If there's not a discrete amount of steps that I'm going for, I'm recoloring the patches. So I'm calling it green. Obviously, if it's field, if a patch is within a dog's sphere of influence, I color that blue. That happens here where I do assess dog nearby, and within the given dog strength radius here, I designate these patches as dog nearby patches and color them blue. I do the same thing, in this an analogous thing in this assess wolves nearby method. And then I move the dogs, I move the sheep, I move the wolves, and I keep doing that. And so far, it's working pretty well. It's sort of behaving more or less how I would expect. There's been some surprises. I think there are some things I would do differently if I approach this model again, but generally, again, within the given time I had to develop it, I think it works pretty well. So there you go. There's the livestock protection agent-based model. Thanks.